I finally finished watching The Boys Season 2 a couple weeks ago, and do you know who's a really great character? Kimiko. But it got me thinking that she's essentially this trope, which I'm going to dub as the damaged ninja girl. As the name suggests, she's an Asian lady who has seen some shit. And she also knows how to cause some shit by kicking ass with some martial arts. I've seen it in almost every other action movie that doesn't have the Asian woman as a villain, that has one of the Asian girls as one of the good guys. But like a lot of tropes, this isn't inherently a bad thing. Hi, I'm Stella, and welcome to Salicot Cinemas, where I talk about movies because I watch too many and have too many opinions about them. This will hopefully be one of the first videos where I dissect tropes with Asian people in it. I'll mostly be concentrating on American movies, but there might be some videos where I trickle into Asian cinema. There's this one guy, Zwardio77 on Reddit, that was talking about this one trope that a lot of Asian people have where their faces are usually covered and therefore their race is kind of ambiguous. And it gave me the idea to do a bunch of videos that dissect tropes that center around Asian people. So hopefully this is the first of many, but credit to him for giving that inspiration to me. Today I'm going to be talking about the damaged ninja girl. Who she is, how she can be done badly, and how she can be done really well. Essentially, she's an amalgamation of the Dragon Lady, the Trinity Syndrome, the Broken Bird, all roped into one, with some other added characteristics. As Tasha Robinson calls the Trinity Syndrome in her article for The Dissolve, the Trinity Syndrome is coined after Carrie-Anne Moss's character, Trinity, in The Matrix. She's a highly capable woman who is seemingly the archetypal, strong female character, who is both mentally and physically strong. It's common that she's paired with a man that she needs to help train, who is probably the main character of the story. And he starts out the movie to be very incompetent and follows the hero arc, and he is the one who saves the day. It doesn't matter how many years the woman has trained and is infinitely more qualified, due to the fact that the man is the chosen one, or simply because he's a strong man. The man saves the day. At the end of the day, the Trinity is framed to be this all-capable woman, but none of her accomplishments actually affect the larger portion of the plot, and probably ends up needing to be saved. The Dragon Lady is basically the classic femme fatale, a hypersexualized woman who seduces the protagonist, but is ultimately a villain. An example of this is 90% of the women in the Bond franchise. The difference between the Dragon Lady and the femme fatale is that the Dragon Lady is explicitly Asian. She'll probably be wearing a cheongsam or some other sexualized version of traditional Asian wear, and she is highly versed in martial arts. Bonus points if she has a katana or otherwise sharp weapon. And finally, the Broken Bird is a female character who has seen some shit and has turned out to be a stoic badass. Now let's talk about the damaged ninja girl. First of all, she's pretty. She's always pretty. This is Hollywood we're talking about. Of course she's gotta be pretty. Like the Broken Bird, she's got a very hard and tragic past, which usually explains why she's so well versed in fighting. Like the Dragon Lady, the DNG is explicitly Asian, and the movie draws attention to the fact that she is Asian, be it through her wardrobe, her weapon, or her vast knowledge in martial arts. Also, like the Dragon Lady, big bonus if she's got a sword or has some sort of superpower that gives her some kind of sharp ability like claws. Like the Trinity Syndrome, she is very rarely the star of her own story. And since she is an Asian woman in Hollywood, 9 times out of 10 the DNG is paired with a white man, who tends to be the protagonist, which is a trope very eloquently dubbed as Mighty Whitey and Mellow Yellow on tvtropes.org. And though it is a TV and movie trope, it is a thing that happens a lot in real life. Obviously, date who you want to date, but I think there's some room for reflection when so many women, specifically Asian women, will emphatically say that they do not date Asian men.
Kind of have a no dating Asian sort of policy. You kind of look a bit like my brother.
Sorry, I have a no dating Asian policy as well. I'm not.
But it's morbidly even more common for white dudes to have yellow fever and fetishize this ideal of a docile Asian woman. But that's a very complicated topic that I will not be going into in this video. On top of those traits, the DNG is also one of the heroes, unlike the Dragon Lady, who is typically the antagonist. The DNG is good to her core, and always has the protagonist's best interests at heart, even though she's probably got a high kill count. A lot of the time she is submissive, despite being physically strong, by her being shy to some extent, or just quiet. So, like all tropes, the DNG is just a pattern for what a character can be. They aren't always inherently bad, but there are definitely some movies and TV shows that take what is typically seen in other movies, and rather than expanding on their characteristics to make them more interesting and well-rounded, said movies just stop with the baseline and prioritize someone else's stories. Again, not inherently bad, but it can be certainly annoying when there isn't a lot of Asian representation in the first place, and when we do get it, it can be done some dirty. Katana from Suicide Squad is a pretty easy example of the damaged ninja girl, which is fitting because she's played by Karen Fukuhara, who is now one of my bad examples and also one of my good examples of this trope. She's the only superhero in this movie of supervillains who were forced to do good. Therefore, she has that unflappable moral code, even though she has obviously killed a lot of people. Her husband was brutally murdered, and her backstory hinges on getting revenge for him. In case you missed the literal katana that is her weapon of choice and her name, she's got the Japanese flag painted on her mask, therefore fills that criteria of the overt Asianness of the D&G. The only thing missing from my criteria is that she's more of a stoic and isn't as nice and polite as the normal D&G. Most of what she says is snarky, and she has some take-no-shit attitude, so that's a surprisingly nice subversion.
Son, so she has to hide behind a mask.
I am not hiding.
Yeah, that was gangster.
But don't worry, that is countered by the fact that she has hardly any lines and shows up halfway through the movie. I wish I could speak more about her character arc, but she doesn't really have one. She's just like a supporting character. My poster child of the damaged ninja girl is none other than Knives Chau. Now, she doesn't have a very dark and tragic past like other examples I'm going to give, but she does take Scott breaking up with her very, very hard, and she takes that just as severely as Katana takes her husband being murdered. She's quiet and subservient to Scott while they're dating, and she idolizes him so much to the point that her entire story arc centers around this mediocre white dude. And of course, she knows martial arts and her weapons of choice are 2 knives, like her name, basically like Katana. And then there's also Mako Mori. But don't get me wrong, I love Pacific Rim. I've seen this movie 1,000 times, but you can also love something and be able to spot its flaws. Initially, she gives off the air that she is shy because she is reserved. She's held back by her adoptive father to protect her, despite how capable she has shown herself to be, and it takes some coaxing from Riley for her to push the boundaries. But we do get a genuine and in-depth look at her motivations, her personality, and she isn't completely docile. She does have the tragic past of her parents dying, but it's not out of place because it's a post-apocalyptic world. Her knowing martial arts isn't made into a quote-unquote thing, since this is technically a military operation. Del Toro subverted the trope of them getting together by emphasizing that they are friends, which was great since the bond between the two was organic and wasn't forced. A lot of this trope was subverted, and it built her up to be this really great character. However, when the moment counted, she gets fridged, and Riley steals her of her moment to save her so that he is the one that saves the day on his own, as a typical means of self-sacrifice. By the way, fridging is a term to describe when a character, most likely a woman, is incapacitated and misses the climax of the story. I don't want to make it seem like the existence of the D&G is inherently a bad thing, because when it's done well, it can be done really well, and birth a beautifully written and genuinely enticing character. And thus we have Kimiko from The Boys, who is also played by Karen Fukuhara. Admittedly, when she was first introduced to the gang, I was like, really? The one woman and the one Asian you have in your actual crew is mute? And I'm not the only one that thinks this. Frenchie spends a lot of time projecting this idealized version of her, which is pretty textbook damaged ninja girl. What I love about The Boys is that it plays with the gray area of morality a lot. They don't typically assign a character with being a bad or a good person solely due to what they've done. Well, except for a select few. The show explores how everyone bends their moral code for their cause or just to make their lives easier. Like taking Compound V to become stronger, or Huey being framed as the most innocent character, but killed translucent in the first episode because of the trauma of a soup killing his girlfriend made him trigger happy. Kimiko is no exception. It's clear that in the beginning, like I said, Frenchie had this savior complex when it came to her, even before he properly had a conversation with her. She's been through enough trauma to make her mute, and Frenchie spends a lot of time trying to make a connection with her and wanting to save her. In season 2, he even kisses her, thinking that's what she wanted, and he was very resilient to her becoming a hitman because he thought it would damage her soul. Kimiko is an elevated version of this trope because the white man isn't her vessel to inspire her to be a better person. Frenchie doesn't fix her, nor does she want him to. She's jaded because shit happens, and instead of caving into being this angel that Frenchie has made her out to be, she continues to be a hitman and buys herself a stupidly ugly expensive ring. I love that the show didn't try to waste time and justifying why Kimiko was a hitman and having her donate all the money to some noble cause or anything. She just wanted to make that cash money and she knew what she was good at. Kimiko doesn't even bother to try to reform Frenchie or any of the men in her crew. Yes, she cares deeply about her friends, but her story is her own. And even though she is mute, that doesn't stop her from having her own personality or being outspoken in her own way. I personally really hope that the show doesn't make Frenchie and Kimiko a couple. I'm a big sucker for genuine friendships between men and women, and I also really love when a woman's plot isn't centered around romance, because it so rarely happens. And she's the only female in the show that isn't officially paired off. But I guess I could forgive it if they did, since the chemistry between the two doesn't actually feel that forced. Similarly, Sun Bak from Sense8, which was a show that was done such dirty from Netflix. For those who haven't seen it, it's a Netflix sci-fi show that was made by the Wachowskis. Follows 8 different people, called a cluster, who learn that they are mentally and emotionally linked. Anyway, Sun is mostly quiet and has had the misfortune of her mother passing away due to cancer. She also used to do competitive Korean martial arts. Sun is the daughter of a Korean business mogul, and in order to save her brother, who isn't as cunning or as competent as her, Sun takes the fall for his embezzlement, unknowing that he was actually guilty, and that he was going to kill their father and trying to kill her too. However, in jail, she meets women that were victims of domestic violence and empower her to stand up to her family and take revenge. In the beginning of the show, she treats her cluster like a hallucination, but as she grows to love and appreciate them, they become her chosen family. Spoilers for those who haven't watched it, but those that were in a cluster can take over, or basically physically possess another person in said cluster. And while this is discovered through a very giant organ in the show, there is the practical use of the others allowing Sun to take over with her martial arts and beat up anyone if they are in need of some muscle. What makes Sun different from the bad examples of the DNG and similar to Kimiko is that she isn't defined by someone else's story. Yes, she has a lot of emotional scars and cares deeply for her chosen family, but she has a story arc of her own. She has agency and clear motives for what she wants. And yes, she is strong both mentally and physically, but she allows her friends to support her when it is needed. Like I said, the existence of the DNG isn't inherently a bad thing or problematic. Yes, she can play into the stereotypes of being a quiet Asian woman that doesn't get a lot of the spotlight on a surface level. However, once she actually has agency and we see a genuine progression or regression of her own wants and needs, that can make for a genuinely interesting character arc and elevate the entirety of the narrative. Sure, a lot of them have a knack for martial arts and don't talk much, but some of them kill bitches, take money, and buy stupidly ugly jewelry, and some of them have giant psychic organs. After some thought, I decided I'm going to be uploading on a bi-weekly schedule, so instead of every Tuesday at 11 a.m, it will be every other Tuesday. Because these videos take a lot of time, and I've got a full-time job, and I want to have a life. And by having a life, I mean I actually want to be watching movies. I'll probably have a pop-up video every so often to review a movie that had just come out, and if you don't want to miss those, don't forget to turn on the notifications. I've been Salakot Cinemas. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe check out one of my other videos over there on the side. See you in 2 weeks on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Bye!